Folks, it is Freaky Friday, and that means a lot of things. It's Memorial Day weekend. You got a nice opportunity to relax. You've made it through another week of the off season, and a mailbag has arrived on the beat. Welcome to the Austin and Berm show. That is Berm. I am Austin, and it's a Friday. Ohio State's going to play Texas on a Saturday, and it wanted to do it on a Sunday, Berm. I never gave this much opportunity of actually coming to fruition because why would Texas want to allow that to happen? But that had been the push Ohio State had been making to adjust the season opening kickoff away from Big Noon on Saturday, and that attempt has failed.
The reason you do it if you're Texas is because if you lose this game, it doesn't matter. And having the spotlight of the entire country on Sunday night matters more than the outcome of this game, especially if it's what we are all pretty much expecting, which will be another classic, similar to the way that the Cotton Bowl went. So I think that, yes, it's kind of a weak move by Texas to decline it, because I think that it really would have done a great job and it'd be a good thing for the Big Ten and the SEC to have these two programs in the national spotlight on a Sunday night at 7:00. We've seen Ohio State play on Mondays. We've seen Ohio State play on Saturday nights. Did we play a Sunday night game a few years ago? I don't think so. No, we didn't. We were at Virginia Tech on Monday, but I don't know. I just think that it obviously makes sense from Texas to avoid some of the difficulty that comes with a Sunday night travel. I don't know. Maybe they want an extra day off, but you take yourself out of the spotlight, and that sucks. I do have a question before we dive into this episode of the beat on tabs. But normally Memorial Day weekend is like the last weekend of May. But as I look outside, it is October 235th. So I don't understand why it's Memorial Day weekend, and I don't like it. And as we as a country are discussing things like eliminating the penny or removing daylight savings, I think we should all come to some sort of agreement that Memorial Day can't happen on October 235th. There has to be some sort of regulation that says it's only Memorial Day if it's 75 degrees. Otherwise, we're just going to push it back a week.
You have a lot of good ideas. You run on a fascinating platform.
Thanks.
Including your no truck drivers on the road between 9 and 5, which is one of my favorites.
It has to happen. It's the only thing that makes sense for this country. I've actually decided to expand. I've actually fine-tuned that program a little bit. It's been a while since we've been on the road. They are allowed on any road other than 2-lane highways. So if there's more than 2 lanes, then they can still be on the road, but only in the right-hand lane. But any roads that are less than 2 lanes, they are not allowed to be on. Semis, tractor trailers are not going to be allowed between the hours of 8 and 7. So.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Look, I guess everyone knows that I have no problem with noon games, and I understand why fans are frustrated that they don't get these primetime opportunities for Ohio State with their biggest games. And I'm not trying to change anyone's opinion on that. And I'm also not going to make excuses for Texas refusing to go along with this change. But it is a little bit complicated, even if you have 3 months for a program to change its schedule, to change its hotel reservations, its flights. And you'd say, well, it's only 1 day and you have all this time to prepare in advance. And I get that. It should seem like you could snap your fingers and just move that game. And it was an effort was made to do so. But like Texas is also, you said, trying to get an extra day off. Well, they would have to sacrifice a day. They still have to play the following week. So like
they play San Jose State the following week. So I don't know that counts.
I get it. And again, that fits into this bucket of, yes, if you really wanted to make it happen, if Ohio State kicked in some extra money to the non-conference matchup contract to help Texas get another hotel or find another hotel or change their flight plans, like, yes, I understand that is feasible, and as much money is at stake for college football and as much attention is going to be on that game, although there is already another Sunday primetime game, which would be fighting for eyeballs, which maybe is a reason that Fox wouldn't want to do that. I can understand.
What's that game?
It's Notre Dame.
Notre Dame's on Sunday? Notre Dame, North Carolina. Is that right?
Yeah. No, North Carolina plays TCU. I mean, do I have that wrong? Does Notre Dame not play on Sunday? I thought they played on Sunday.
I think that they play Wisconsin.
Yeah, they play
Miami on the 31st. So they play on Sunday night at 7:30. So either way, the reality is we see NFL Sunday night primetime football games on Saturdays, and we see it on Thursdays. NBC will have Sunday night football on Thursday. Like, I just think, we don't need to go to the extreme that Ohio legislators are trying to do. This Tex Fisher, which is a fun name for an Ohio legislator who wants
I wonder who he cheers for. Come on.
Yeah, he wants to ban noon games. I think we don't need to go that far, but I do think that there has to be some sort of willingness from the television networks to put your biggest draw in primetime. And I don't think the big noon kickoff has to be at noon. You can still call it whatever you want whenever you play the games. It's irrelevant. I understand Texas not wanting to do this. I think it sucks for the fans. I think it sucks for the exposure for the two universities and the football teams, because it would be awesome. And hey, I don't see why we couldn't have a 3:30 on a Sunday with Notre Dame Miami at 7:30, because it's Labor Day weekend. There's no NFL games. There should be games all day Sunday, in my opinion. Since is that week 0 this year, or is that week 1? I don't know. Is it week -1?
That's the week 1, the actual week 1.
Okay, so week 0 is the 23rd.
Oh yeah.
Wow, we're getting earlier and earlier.
Well, it needs to be earlier because we're playing games until the end of January.
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to matter. It's going to, we're going to keep expanding the playoffs. We're going to keep doing everything else. The whole sport right now is just a constant state of experimentation. And I just feel like moving a game, 4 months ahead of time doesn't feel like it should be that big of a deal.
Yeah. And I understand. I'm not saying that you feeling that way or any of the fans that are upset feeling that way should not feel that way. I get it. And I hate to be in this position where it comes off like I'm making excuses or rationalizing Texas's decision or Fox's business model. I'm just explaining that that's the reality. It's not because I personally, Austin Ward, want the game to be at noon. I think for the season opening game,
just admit it. You want to watch the Red Sox and Yankees on Sunday afternoon on Fox.
I think it was I looked at that Major League Baseball schedule. It was like 3 different games that it was a regional broadcast schedule. Like there could be a Royals game that was going to draw 15 million fewer eyeballs than Ohio State and Texas. Even if I'm looking at it from that perspective, clearly Fox's contract with Major League Baseball is ludicrous to have running up against what it pays for college football and the
especially for one game a week. No one watches it because you have to pay $30 a month to watch baseball on MLB TV or the FanDuel Sports Network or whatever the hell it's on now. No one cares. I think we just need to eliminate all this discussion and just say Ohio State fans should just be throwing a bone. They're the national champ. It's a 1 versus 2 matchup. Let's just have it in prime time and stop all this other rigmarole. I'm against it. Period. I think that we just need some sanity to take place. Somebody has to step in and say, "Hey, you know what? For the benefit of the sport, not for the benefit of Fox, not for the benefit of ESPN, for the benefit of the sport, let's put a 1 versus 2 matchup of the two teams that played in the de facto national championship game a year ago, because that's what most people viewed that Ohio State-Texas game as, and put them in primetime because that's where the sport should have them, because that's what's best for the growth of college football and the celebration of college football. But I digress. It doesn't matter. My feelings are irrelevant.
Here's my bold prediction. You can hold me to it when it gets to that. When you talk about a bigger spotlight, a brighter spotlight for college football and for the good of the game, Ohio State and Texas at noon to kick off the first full weekend of college football is going to get the best ratings of any game that weekend. I'm including the primetime games. So that part of it, if we want to talk about it being difficult for high school recruits to get there and maybe the atmosphere being less buzzy, yeah, I would say that those two things are right. But in terms of people that are going to watch this game, I don't know that it's going to change if it was noon or 7:30 on Fox. Like,
it might not be dramatically as far as the numbers go and the millions of people who watch it on Fox, but I'm thinking about our Texas brethren, our guys like Tex, whatever his name is, Tex Fisher, the Ohio representative. I'm thinking about those folks who have to watch an 11 a.m. game in their hometown. Like, that's not ideal. Like, that's all I'm saying. It's not ideal to have to get up the first Saturday of the fall football season and watch a game at 11 a.m.
All right. When I get to Texas later today, I'll check with them and see.
I bet you they're all going to wish it was later.
Yeah, you might be right, because it will be at 11 a.m. local time. Let's get into one of our first questions that we received in the mailbag. It was multi-layered, multifaceted, and they wanted us to rank these losses for Ohio State 1 through 4. Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles, Ohio State draft picks, and Ohio State defensive draft picks. Now that's a pretty big net on both sides of the football compared to the coordinators, but the biggest impact to the least impact. Where would you fall on that 1 through 4 ranking, Berm?
The Ohio State offensive draft picks.
Because of the quarterback?
Well, there's 2 first-round offensive linemen. There's a quarterback that won a national championship. There's 2 second-round running backs, including a guy in Travion Henderson who became like the heart and soul of the team on and off the field. The guy who was like the most devastating pass protector I've ever seen at running back, did not named Ezekiel Elliott, a guy who was a home run threat every time he touched the ball. To me, like, the individual player I think may surprise people would be Travion Henderson. I think he's.
Oh, really?
I just think that what you lose when you lose a guy who does all of the things he did, and a guy who took a back seat to Quinshon Judkins coming in and did things the way he handled himself. I just think that he's really, really hard to replace. And obviously Chip Kelly was brought in, and it wasn't because Chip Kelly was like all of a sudden this infallible play caller. I mean, we've talked about it before. There were certainly moments throughout last season where you're like, man, that's the best play caller in the game, and that's what he's calling. What he allowed Ryan Day to do, I wonder if that's going to be harder to replace as Ryan Day took on the first year of CEO version of himself. The defense was the number 1 ranked defense in the country because you had 8 dudes drafted. You know what I mean? Like, that's obviously pretty hard to replace. If we wanted to narrow it down and get into the micro version of each spot, Cody Simon's pretty hard to replace, but you have 2 pretty good linebackers in Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese ready to step up. Lathan Ransom, like, there are certainly guys that I think that deserve more of a conversation individually, but I guess I would still go offensive play calling or offensive draft picks in general because of the 2 offensive linemen, the top 35 running, picks at running back, a quarterback who was maybe the best leader I've seen at quarterback in Ohio State other than JT Barrett in my life. So, I mean, I think it's a pretty tough group to replace.
I think you're probably right. I want to argue, play devil's advocate. I think for me, the reason it's the offense is because you are losing a senior veteran established quarterback. And we saw the leadership and the on-field production of Will Howard and how critical that was in that playoff push. And if Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kienholz or a true freshman and Tavian Sinclair had any kind of body of work to build on that was close, you'd say, oh, well, that's okay. The next one's coming in, but they really don't. I mean, Lincoln did not take snaps last year and was not ready for the Cotton Bowl as a true freshman the year before that. Julian Sayin has only seen that mop-up duty. We've talked about all of that in the quarterback breakdown that we did on the beat, so I don't need to rehash that. But like, to me, that's more pressing than anything else, because I think that the offensive line is in pretty good shape. I think, as difficult as it's going to be to replace Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer and Donovan Jackson.
Seth McLaughlin.
And Seth McLaughlin, although they had already got a jump start on that with Carson Hinsman to great effect. And I think, like you say, losing 2 first-round draft picks, like, they'd already got a jump start on that thanks to Donovan Jackson as well. So, like, I'm not meaning to dismiss that out of the equation. Like, I think the offensive line is in good hands and in good shape. To me, it comes down to the quarterback. But where I would spin it off and like try to build a more compelling case for the defense is we've spent so much time, arguably too much time. And next week, you'll definitely feel like it's too much time when we get into the spring rewinds on the defensive ends and the defensive tackles. But when you're having to replace your entire defensive front, that is a daunting proposition. And it doesn't matter who your coordinator is. And it doesn't matter how legendary your position coach is. Like Tyleik Williams, the loss there, for as much as we think about the upside with Caden McDonald and Edric Houston in at tackle, like the Ty and Ty combination is going to be really hard to replace in terms of strength, experience, leadership, productivity, statistical output. Like, and that's not even factoring in what you're losing in Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who were, 4-year players and multi-year starters for Ohio State. We spent a lot of time talking about transfer portal needs, and if Ohio State addressed that, could have addressed that better at defensive tackle. They did do that with 2 pickups, one in the winter window and one in the spring window at defensive end. But, you mentioned Cody Simon. You didn't say Jordan Hancock's name, which we've done that repeatedly. He's one of the most versatile players on Ohio State's defense from a year ago. I mean, Denzel Burke, even if we think that the cornerback ceiling could be raised this year with what they've got, like you're trying to replace guys that when that number is that large for starters and that much experience, that's a really huge deal. And it sounds crazy that we would take both the on-field player piece over 2 decorated coordinators, but that's where I am, because I think I always viewed Chip Kelly as a bridge to the future, a bridge most specifically to Brian Hartline. Now that happened earlier than anticipated, but I think as long as Ryan Day's around and as long as Brian Hartline's around and Keenan Bailey, like that's what really spurs on that passing attack. And I thought that Tyler Bowen, even if it wasn't a name that we were intimately familiar with going into the hiring process, looks like a pretty savvy addition for that run game piece and coaching the offensive line. And I've said over and over, like, glad I kept an open mind about Matt Patricia and his potential, because he has been a huge home run. And that's not to replace a deficiency, because Jim Knowles had the number 1 defense in the country. It is to maintain that level. And I'd just be stunned if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm picking the offensive draft losses, and I'm going to include Seth McLaughlin in there, even though he was not technically drafted, as the Remington Award winner, because if you look at the guys who are replacing those players, I think Julian Sayin may get drafted eventually higher than Will Howard, but I don't know that Carnell Tate or Brandon Innes is going to be drafted higher than Emeka Egbuka. I don't believe that you're going to see 2 offensive tackles drafted higher than Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons were in this draft out of the current lineup. And I don't believe that the running backs will be drafted higher than Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Whereas on the defensive side of the ball, outside of Tyleik Williams, who I think may go down as one of the more interesting, like, character studies in Ohio State football history when all is said and done, because the guy ended up being a 1st-round pick. And 2 years ago, a lot of people were just writing him off and saying, well, is he ever going to get it? Is he ever going to care? Is he ever going to like put in the effort?
You can say me specifically. I mean, there's
but you weren't alone. You weren't alone in that. A lot of people had that discussion, and Ty himself was throwing himself out there as a pig to slaughter, saying, "Hey, I don't know. I didn't try hard enough. I wasn't doing enough." I think Kenyatta Jackson will probably get drafted higher than Jack Sawyer did. I think even Bo Atkinson, I think, it has a potential, if he can tap into it, to be in that 3rd or 4th round draft window. I think Sonny Siles and Arvell Reese will be drafted ahead of where Cody Simon was. I think, as we talked about with the corners on Thursday's show, I think they're going to be drafted higher than Denzel Burke was whenever they are deciding to come out. So to me, it's just the top level talent on the offense having to replace all those guys, and then you throw Will Howard and what he meant to this program as a leader on top of it. I just don't. I don't think you can replace those guys quite as easily.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you are right about that, Berm. We were also asked about the move potentially here, or I guess the awakening of people with common sense that straight seeding is what needs to happen in the college football playoff. What is wrong with these people, Berm? I guess that's my question. Why do they not understand math? Why do they not understand how brackets work? Why didn't they go to 16 right away? And why did we have to see some of the hijinks with the automatic qualifiers? Like, yes,
I don't know.
the answer is straight seeding is the way to go.
We complain a lot, okay? Like that's sort of one of our things. We like to complain about college football, and it seems
because we love it.
Yeah, but it seems as though there's a lot of people who are pretty dumb running the show at times. So let's just when they announced the expanded playoff from 4 to 12, what was the crux of our primary argument? It was not expanding is bad. It was 12 is the dumbest number you can go to. It made 0 sense from the start. So go to 16, ended at 16. I think everyone's fine with that. The second argument was that there's no way you can go to a seeding model that wasn't straight seeding because it just made 0 sense. So we got through 1 year of it. It was dumb this year. It seems like they're going to fix it. So here's the question.
Okay.
Let's go back to last year and what Ohio State's path to the national championship would have been had they gone straight seeding model versus what the Buckeyes had to run through with Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame. So straight seeding model, Ohio State would have had to play Arizona State, then Texas, then Georgia, and then Oregon.
Assuming no upsets.
Assuming no upset. So those were the highest ranked seeds. Now, Georgia, of course, lost to Notre Dame, so they were eliminated anyway. So nothing really would have changed as to who the Buckeyes had to play other than that first round game against Tennessee and Arizona State. So would it have mattered? Probably not. Did it matter for the road teams in the first round of the playoff that were the higher seeded teams or the second round? Absolutely it did, because those teams just Oregon got bushwhacked by Ohio State that they should never have had to play in the second round of the playoff. So I feel worse for Oregon in last year's setup than I do Ohio State, because they are the ones that got screwed the most. And, we knew Ohio State's path was going to be difficult as the 8 seed, but Oregon's path was just as difficult as the 1 seed, if not more, because they had to play Ohio State.
You're never going to catch me feeling sorry for Oregon. If they caught a bad draw, so be it.
Is this because they put you on the roof?
Now, for Tomorrow We May Die Brewing, we'll always have a special place in both of our hearts.
Wonderful. Salem, Oregon. Folks, if you're ever in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, you need to go to Salem, Oregon and go to Forever We May Die Brewing Company. It was a great, great time.
Do you
Beautiful place.
You think when we get to Washington in September, we should just drive down there?
Yes, probably. We actually have to have an offline discussion about the Wisconsin game and whether or not I'm going to go or not. My niece is getting married the night before the Wisconsin game, and so now I'm in this battle of having to decide between a trip to New Glarus or my niece's wedding.
So why do we have to have it offline? I think it needs to be started right here.
Oh well, I think we've already begun it online.
I mean, you are at the forefront of no fall weddings during football.
I know, but it's not my wedding. I didn't plan it. But I also realized that my niece has, double-digit uncles, and this is the crux.
They're not going to miss you at all.
This is the problem. No, I'm the favorite uncle of all of my nieces and nephews, right? So, the 9 other uncles could miss the game, miss the wedding, and I don't think she would be affected by it. But if I miss it, I think it hurts. I'm like her favorite uncle.
Did she think that having it on Friday would be helpful for you?
I don't know if that was part of the reasoning, but probably wasn't too much of the reasoning. But, I guess I could look into like a 7 a.m. flight to Wisconsin the day after. But, I don't like to travel on day of game.
Wow.
So,
the notebook is going to be wild if I have to carry around that camera and just point at
just a selfie stick.
No,
that's why you got Adam the King.
Oh boy, I think he would actually love that.
We'll have to figure that out. It was just rattling around in my brain right now as we were talking about Washington, because Washington and Wisconsin are so similar.
You've got me absolutely rattled there. We had another question that was about a similar topic about difficult to replace. And it was more 2025, can't change the roster, can't look back at who's gone. What is a current concern for you, the biggest concern that you currently have about Ohio State's roster, and then how much of a concern it actually is to you?
I mean, again, we just mentioned Tyreek Williams' name a few times. As you brought up, replacing the entire defensive front, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau weren't really part of that discussion. He's as good as they were in crunch time for Ohio State. The challenge at replacing Tyreek Williams and Ty Hamilton is not something Ohio State is equipped to replace. Period. Like,
Right.
So as good as Edric Houston and Caden McDonald may turn out to be, and maybe they're going to shock and awe, but they're going to have to be really, really dynamic and play a ton of snaps because the depth behind them is so sparse. That defensive tackle situation could very well be this year's Achilles heel for Ohio State. And I mean, they wanted to address it in the spring. The question is, I think, has it taken on a life of its own because Ryan Day himself came out after the spring game and said, we need to find defensive tackles. And so he sort of opened the can of worms. But to me, that's really the only spot that's even a major concern. I'm not going to throw gasoline on the idea that the quarterback room is in limbo or whatever, because obviously everyone knows they're unproven. But I think the talent level is there to replace Will Howard with Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz. But I don't see it at defensive tackle, and I don't see that there's an answer on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if your quarterback situation, if you don't have a definitive starter and you are a national title contender, that qualifies as a legitimate concern to have. How much concern should you have? If Ryan Day believes strongly in both Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz. So
Eli Brickhandler's there. Everything is coming up roses.
And you've got 4 guys back in that room, which is exactly what he wanted. So I would say that it's absolutely legitimate to put it in a concern bucket, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because the track record of success with Ohio State quarterbacks, even if we say like statistically and objectively that the Kyle McCord year was the worst one out of it, it still wasn't that bad. Like,
I think he was still like the Big Ten's best quarterback that year, maybe other than JJ McCarthy, right? So
even in that situation, like that wasn't, in my opinion, what kept Ohio State from winning the Big Ten and from winning a national championship. So if that is the floor and you believe that Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz or Tavian St. Clair, who's not really in the starting conversation, but if you believe that their upside surpasses what Kyle McCord gave and the key components of orchestrating this passing attack remain, and you have Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Max Clare, et cetera, I tend to think that it's probably going to be fine. Concern? Yes, because it's a quarterback. Am I very concerned about it? On a 1 to 10, I'd be like a 3.
Yeah, I am. I know that people have a legitimate reason to be worried about the quarterback situation because maybe you would have hoped Julian Sayin had emerged and said, this is my job and run away with it in the spring. I don't think it's a negative that Lincoln Kienholz forced the competition to be extended. Again, to me, there's nothing that Ohio State can do to replace Ty and Ty, period.
Yep.
And that's it for me.
All right. This says, Berm, hot dogs or hamburgers at a cookout. What do you have planned for Memorial Day weekend?
I assume other people will be cooking out again, being that it is going to, I think Saturday it's supposed to be like 35 degrees and maybe by Monday, I think we're supposed to get back into the 60s in the Northwest Ohio, Southeast Michigan quadrant. It's not really looking like cookout weather, but I just wanted to know from your perspective, because there seems to be a great debate nationally about which is the best route to go at a cookout. Now, of course, most people would just dive in and say, give me one of each, because that's a natural response in the gluttonous country we live in. However, for you personally, given the option and you can only pick one, which way do you go?
But why do you only get to pick one?
I don't know, because maybe your local grocer had a run. Maybe there was a hot dog flu or something that really affected the the stockpile. I don't know, but if you could only pick one, which way do you go? And what is your opinion on people who shame others about their hot dog toppings?
Well, I don't think you do it. I don't think you shame people about any of their choices, lifestyle, food, fandom, whatever. I'd say let them live. And I know for sure that that's part of your presidential platform is to,
100%.
I don't like ketchup. I hate ketchup.
Here's the funny thing about ketchup for me, especially on a dog. I don't particularly care for it from a flavor perspective. It's not necessary. I would be more than content with just straight mustard on the dog. And I'm a yellow mustard guy. I'm not one of those spicy browns or whatever, despite my affinity for hot food. But on a hot dog, just from an aesthetic standpoint, I put ketchup on there because I think it looks better to have ketchup and mustard.
Huh. Well, that's great for you.
Yeah, I'm going to avoid the question. You going hot dog or burger?
Well, I wanted to tackle that latter part first because, like, I may be guilty because I tell Allie and Liberty could swim in ketchup, and it just disgusts me. And I tell Liberty that on Sundays, it's illegal to use ketchup, and so I may be guilty in some ways of
a little bit of shame,
of shaming, and I'm going to have to look in the mirror and correct that. But it's got to be a hamburger for me. If I'm at a proper cookout, I'm definitely taking both. That's why I've lived by this 80-20 rule. So on holidays and on the weekend, I can definitely partake in both great things and have a wonderful cookout. But I just, there's nothing better than being outside and having a hamburger on a holiday. I would never pass on that to have a hot dog.
Do you know why I lean towards the dog? You probably don't, but I'm going to tell you why. Because the quality of hamburgers you get, depending on where you're at, depending on whose barbecue you're at, varies so greatly. Because so many people are content buying frozen patties, the little thin ones, and just throwing them on the grill, and they don't know how to season them. And I think that the dog at times is just a safer option because it's hard to mess it up. Where the burger can be really screwed up by someone who doesn't know how to cook a burger. So that's
why don't you just jump on the grill?
That happens more often than I'd like to admit, especially at my family get-togethers. I end up being the one cooking no matter where we are. Now, back to the shaming part of the program. We certainly don't want anyone to feel bad about their food choices. But in the event that you have a friend who eats a burger that's just a bun and meat, we know a few people like that.
We've worked with people like that.
We've worked with people like that. That still is an acceptable reason to mock someone.
Yeah.
Like just a meat and bun. Like that. Oh, the only thing that's worse than a meat and bun is a meat bun and ketchup.
Oh, you can't do that.
So my ketchup situation on a hot dog is just it's a thin layer just for the visual.
Do you need the third color with the relish or
no? No, that's not necessary. Because the mustard wins anyway. Now, if you can get a little cheese on there, a little sprinkled cheddar, and then now you're talking. Now, the hard part is, of course, you don't always get a good melt on your cheddar cheese on a dog because
you definitely don't.
It's not really on there long enough to give the melt. So whatever. It is what it is.
It's hard out there.
Yeah.
But we hope everyone has a great cookout, whatever they want to eat. Yeah, bro.
We will not be here on Monday on the beat on the Austin and Berm show.
Because nobody at 97.1 The Fan or 10 TV will be working. We all are encouraged to celebrate responsibly or memorialize responsibly over the weekend. And we hope that you do. But we will be back on Tuesday. Yes.
Yeah. Tuesday.
Anything else you wanted to add to that?
We're going to talk about the defensive line. We're going to break it down Tuesday and Wednesday into defensive ends and defensive tackles. And then, just rocking and rolling. We're now 2 weeks away from one-day recruiting camp starting at Ohio State. We're 2 weeks away from taking the Austin and Berm show to YouTube. Excited to continue growing there. Thank for everyone who's been a part of the first 3 weeks with us, and hope that you have a wonderful weekend. And again, for those who have those who serve, thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to have these ludicrous discussions about hot dogs and hamburgers.
Well said on both fronts. So have a safe and enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you all next week. And before you know it, we'll turn around and it'll be Labor Day and it'll be time for Ohio State football. So one more week of the offseason down. And thanks for spending some of it with us on The Beat. For Berm, I'm Austin. We'll see you on Tuesday.